Can we think about trying to sit in groups of 6? Go ahead and, yeah, approximately 6. We've got a little game we're going to play in just a few minutes. Okay, so did everybody get the Post-it notes? We're going to start by considering our total net worth and writing that number on a Post-it note. We're going to wear it on our foreheads. We're going to have the rest of the hour. Just kidding. Just kidding. We are not going to ask anyone to reveal anything about their private financial circumstances. We are not going to talk about how much money we make, how much money our parents made, how much money our kids make, how much money we have in the bank, what the resale value of our home is, and how much of the mortgage we have or haven't paid up. We're not going to talk about any of our own personal stuff. So please just take a deep breath. Don't worry about that. But while you're taking a deep breath, and just think about how did you feel in that 1 second? Yeah, did anybody's blood pressure go up? Heart rate spike just a bit? Why? Why do we not want to talk about that? Why do we not want to be transparent about our financial situations? I mean, certainly we don't. But why?
It's taboo.
It's taboo. Why is it taboo? Because what's that? It equates with worth. It equates with worth. What kind of worth? Yes. Self-worth. We believe in the myth, nay, the pernicious lie of the meritocracy. We believe that people are paid and people earn according to what they deserve. And when we are people who have earned and are well paid and own, we believe, certainly it's good to believe that we have done it, that we have that because we have earned it, because we deserve it, because that's the way it should be.
And even if we don't believe, we believe that other people believe, and therefore we think that they will judge us for that.
Thank you. That's kind of an important part of making it all work is, it's more important really that that's what everyone else believes than it was what we believe. Right? But I think it's true that we believe it. I personally think, I have experiences of being a high achiever who and a very privileged person, a straight white man, cisgendered, and raised by parents with a good education. I made almost straight A's and went to college and changed my major 17 times and got to explore a bunch of things and borrow money to pay for all that. And it somehow, that didn't really cost me big. I mean, it was like, lots of those changes are mistakes, you might argue. But it's okay, right? I have a lot of privileges that have buffered me along, and I understand what it's like to feel the guilt of winning at life when so many lose. I didn't make the game. I just have been playing it like everyone else all this time. So I know that when we talk about this myth of the meritocracy, I really want it to be true too, right? Because then I get to tell myself, good job. And when I'm confronted with the fact that so much of what I have been blessed with or achieved is not a function of my efforts or my moral character or my hard work, but just luck, just who I happen to be in many cases, or talents that I have that I didn't earn. I have plenty. I'm a talented person, and I'm And so I have this sense of like, oh, I can do things that other people can't do. And so I want it to be true that I deserve to have that position. But I know it's not true. And so what must I feel? Guilt, tons and tons of guilt, crippling guilt, overwhelming guilt. And I'm already running over, but I'm going to stretch this out just a smidge and take some time from later on. I promise, Denise. So the other side of this is I have ADHD, and I have struggled a lot, and I have not lived up to expectations over and over and over and over again. This workshop, for example, I have not done nearly the professional approach to it that Denise has, and so I understand what it's like when I couldn't pay off my student loans and I defaulted on them, and I had creditors calling me at work. I understood the shame that comes along with losing. So I know that when we are losing in this game of American life, we don't feel guilty. We feel terribly ashamed. And even us in that situation, we still accept the lie of the meritocracy, and we work very, very hard to project success. We work hard to have people believing in how great we're doing, right? And for both of those reasons, the guilt of having more when others have less, the shame of having less when so many others have been able to have more. For both of those reasons, we don't want to put that Post-it note on our forehead that says how much we're worth, right? Because many of us are feeling guilty about how much we have, and many of us are also maybe feeling both, but many of us will feel shame about how little we have. But this is the way our world works. This is the biggest challenge we have to talking about these kinds of issues that we're going to talk about today. We are so deeply motivated not to go there. So I ask you to have faith. I'm not going to come around with the Post-it notes and put it on anyone's forehead. And so you do not have to be confronted publicly with those feelings of guilt or shame that you're having now. But I ask you to allow them to be there. Allow yourself to recognize the built-in wall we've all built against this subject matter, okay? Now, Denise has put together a fantastic game that we're going to play, and we're ready to do that now.
Okay, on our next slide, you'll see a very basic concept of class continuum. We're all familiar with this one, and so we're going to use this for our exercise. When we get to the point, when you open your envelopes, this is what we're going to do. Everybody in each group of about 6 should have an envelope. If you don't have one in a group, my husband Jerry will bring you one. Inside your envelope are little t-shirt cutouts. No, don't open it. And on the cutout, we can go to the next slide if we would like. On the cutout is the occupation of your fictitious character on your t-shirt, their education level, their income level, and their wealth. And what we're going to have you do in your group is decide, I think you each have about 8 cutouts, decide where on this imaginary continuum, this basic continuum, oh, there's the microphone, right, that you would place your characters. So we're going to do that for about 5 minutes, and then when we get done, your stuff would look like this. So let me get this other thing. Yeah, you can open them up now. So then after you decide, we're going to come back together as a group, and we're going to have volunteers come and hold our characters, and we're going to place them on the line. So like Jack said, you won't get a sticky note. You're going to get a pretend fictitious character. So in your groups, we want you to first, number one, review the information. on each shirt. Number 2, determine where your group would place that particular person. And 3, be prepared to say why. Some of them will be obvious, but what was the factor? Yes. So if you pass those out to your group members and you each talk about each one separately and decide where you want them on the continuum. We're going to take about 5 minutes. I think you're going to find it's pretty easy. Ready, set, go.
You have it all laid out good. I don't think we need to change it.
Okay. All right, can we come back together now as a full group? Okay, we're going to come back together now as a full group. There are no stickers for your head, but there's no stars if you got it right. There's no right answer. Oh, can you hear me now? Is this on? Oh, okay. Can you stand up and do that, Sheila? Can we have your attention, please? Okay, we're going to come back into our full group now. Can everybody hear me now? Okay, so I need 3 volunteers to come up. If I could get 3 volunteers. And each of you hold up this so the side can see it. So we're going to decide as a group. First, are you the oligarch? Is the oligarch over here? And looking at the oligarch with their occupation, their income, their education, their wealth, where are we placing them? Okay. So if you'll move to the left a few steps, Joe. Okay. Sheila, which one do you have? The 4th grade teacher. Where do we put the 4th grade teacher? In the very middle? Lower middle. Because? Because of her occupation? No. Because of her income? Right. So Kat is saying wealth is also important because if you were to lose your job, then what do you have to live on? Suzanne?
The class system is not just income and savings. It has to do with education. It has to do with your race. It has to do with cultural background.
Right.
Many factors contribute. It's not just the dollar amount.
It's not just the dollar amount. It has to do with these other things. We'll leave her where she is now. And Linda, who are you? An hourly landscape worker. Are we sending her to, where are we sending her? She's lower class than the teacher, for instance. Okay, now I need 3 more volunteers, and we're going to do a restaurant server, a hospital CEO, and a certified nursing assistant, or a CNA. So we want to put them where they need to be along the continuum. Hopefully that's the 3 we have next. Okay, so who is our restaurant server? All right, where's our restaurant server going to go and why? Chris?
I would say behind the landscaper because the restaurant server's income largely relies on tips because they're going to make like $2 an hour otherwise.
So because they rely on tips, you say to the left of the landscape worker.
We don't know their race or their,
We don't know any of the other factors except.
31,000 is definitely after tips.
Okay, who's next? Our hospital CEO? Do we need to move her over away from the, to the right? And what is that based on? Is that also income you're looking at, wealth? Okay, and our certified nursing assistant is Chris, CNA. So he's the person that does all your stuff in the hospital that the nurses don't do anymore. Higher than the teacher?
I'd say probably, I think Chris is probably in the right spot because the income and the savings are the same as the landscape hourly worker, but there's the full diploma education and also certification. So potentially more opportunity.
Any? So are those microphones on? Can they? Never mind. So they're saying that the CNA most likely has more education. High school plus a certification. So was it the money you guys decided over there on, or what did you decide?
Well, the CNA,
So the CNA, Chris, go ahead.
so the CNA is likely,
CNA is lower than the teacher. Oh, thanks.
yeah, so the CNA is likely to have benefits, and I highly doubt the landscaper is going to have benefits as somebody who has worked in landscaping before.
Okay, so is everybody comfortable with where our CNA is now? All right, we need three more volunteers. We have a lottery winner. Is that you, Amelia? Okay, so we have a lottery winner here who was a former restaurant server, but she won $1 million in the lottery. So what is her education is still the same.
High school graduate.
But now she has $1 million plus her regular income. So where are we putting her on our continuum? Does the $1 million make a big difference, or is she still further on? How about you guys over here? Where do you want her? Right next to the other restaurant server?
So next to,
Does everybody think this, or do we move her someplace
No, I
else?
think she goes to the middle.
You know, since most of this has been based on money, I think the lottery winner should be on the other side of the auto mechanic.
Oh, the auto mechanic isn't, we haven't placed her yet.
But a little
but-
further down the line instead of lower class, because I'm thinking most of this has been based on money than anything else.
The other thing with the lottery winner, does she invest it so she's got extra income, or does she go through the whole deal?
Okay, where does everybody want her? We want her here, or we want to move her over? Arrows? Over one. Okay, let's agree with that. Now we've got a rocket scientist. Where is our rocket scientist? Did you already place yourself there? So it's a rocket scientist. Thank you, I'm just kidding. Where does she need to be on here? Is she good where she's at? Okay, good. Now we have the auto mechanic. All right. Is the auto mechanic more middle class than the teacher? No. So Sheila and Kat switch?
So Denise, can you bring us back to these two for a second? Hospital CEO and rocket scientist. Both have masters, both make $250K, both have $2 million in wealth. Why would the hospital CEO be above the rocket scientist if that is where you want her?
Well, it's really hard to do this because you need to know a lot more about them than just the things that we see. You need,
Excellent.
as I mentioned, you know, their race, their culture, where they were brought up, various things, not just like the income.
Okay, so for now, shall we switch those two?
I know.
Or we like them like they are?
CEOs are culturally valued more than scientists.
Okay, oh, that's a shame, okay. Okay, now we've got our auto mechanic. Do we have our auto mechanic where we want it? Yes. Now we got three more, our last three. This exercise is to help us see what we value the most or what we think society values the most. So now I have a restaurant manager. Where does the restaurant manager, the investment banker, and brain surgeon? So let's start with investment manager. Restaurant manager. By the teacher, did somebody say? Above the teacher. Wow, Sheila, you're getting moved down. Okay, and the investment banker. Is that higher than the hospital CEO? Is that investment banker?
I would put the investment banker right next to the CEO because the investment banker has more earning opportunity than the brain surgeon or the rocket scientist.
So it should be above the rocket scientist, but below the CEO.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And then the brain surgeon. Okay, we're going to have our rocket scientist move a little bit to your right, please. Okay, so this exercise was meant, if you look down the row now, this exercise was just meant to help us start thinking about how we classify, how society classifies people. And some of it we're annoyed with, like the teacher not having enough money and stuff. So I know. So we're going to thank all of our volunteers and thank you. And then Jack is going to take us to our next section. So I need for our oligarch, our school teacher, and our hourly guy to keep your posters, okay? Keep your poster. I'll bring you back up later. Yes, please. No, have a seat. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So we can move to the next slide. We'll talk to you about a more complicated, more sophisticated way of understanding class, defining class. First of all, it's a system of power, perceived or actual, and it's about more than money. And class doesn't just tell us sort of where to sit at church. You know, it tells us a lot about what people's values are, what people's beliefs are. In many ways, it shapes our values and beliefs. Go to the next slide. There are at least 8 different categories we're going to break the class down on. In a minute, we're going to work on at least 2 of those. But Denise and I are going to do an extended workshop on Wednesdays in March, the last Wednesday of February and the first 2 of March, that we hope you will be considering coming to join us on. And we're going to get into this in much greater depth. But for now, I just want to highlight that, power and influence, social status, but also how we are socialized. Are we socialized to believe in that myth of meritocracy and to believe that we are the winners and that we project winning? Or some of us might be socialized to believe that we are going to be losers no matter what. And there's a lot more to it than that. Our ideas about gender, our ideas about housing, not just our ideas, but what kind of housing experiences we have is shaped by class. And let's go to the next slide. Yeah.
Can you define socialization?
I am not a sociologist or an academic, but I will tell you that I think socialization is the way we are taught to live, the way we are taught to interact with people in society, how to be social, how to understand ourselves in the context of a social system. Does anybody have a better definition? Okay, let me repeat. Let me just, because I got there's, Kat's, actually, yeah, that was good, Kat. Make sure people hear it.
So what I think of for socialization is people who had, like the $1 million lottery winner, who suddenly have a lot of money, but they weren't socialized in an upper class family. So they don't know, for example, what the fish fork is for, which you were probably trained to do if you grew up in an upper class family and were forced to attend fancy dinners and things like that. And it sounds silly, but it's the reason why there is a barrier to being in the upper class socially, because there are all of these intricate rituals to being upper class that people aren't necessarily taught if they grew up in a different class. So that's part of what socialization means. Do you want me to?
Yeah, and I think gender has a huge element here. You can be making the same as if you were a woman as a cis man, but you've been socialized a different way, or to act a different way, let's say in a meeting setting. So gender plays a big role in where you fall on that hierarchy.
I think housing disappeared off there, but I wanted to say something about housing. I think it's a huge socialization tool, or whatever you want to call it, influence. And especially, I mean, for years I worked with groups for low and moderate income housing, and to have housing be mixed in neighborhoods, and we don't have that at all. So little kids grow up seeing just one kind of neighbor, one kind of education, one kind of being, being the upper middle class, especially being part of all these wonderful things you can do, and have no idea that everyone doesn't live that way. So I think housing plays a super huge, and it's a big thing to undo, because we absolutely do not have low and moderate and higher income housing mixed at all, anywhere, ever.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep this close. Let's see, next slide. We've got race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, ability, plenty of others as well. There's all these factors that work together to create our spectrum of class and our personal sense of where we fit into it and how we fit into it. We can be working class in this kind of way, middle class in that kind of way. We don't have to occupy a single space. These are overlapping categories. All of these categories are overlapping, but also the classes are overlapping. So can we get the next slide? So this is a slightly, has two more categories, slightly more complicated than that first of poor, middle, and upper class. Now maybe we can talk about a 5-category spectrum here. We have the poor and the working poor. We have the working class. We have the middle class, upper class, and we've changed. Now we have the ruling class, or the owning class. One simple way to understand this is just to say that we took the middle class and we broke off the lower portion of it and called it the working class, and we broke off the upper portion of it and called it the upper class. But it's still a spectrum, and you might make more money. You might be a working class person who makes more money than a middle class person that lives down the street, and so this stuff isn't. It's not discrete, and it's quantifiable, but it's difficult to work with it. Let's go to the next slide. So in the U.S., I want to tell you a story about how class has changed over the last 50 years in the U.S., and I don't have nearly enough time to do that this morning. But suffice it to say that after the post-World War II period, say through the early 70s, the New Deal was the economic paradigm of American government. There were lots of institutions that were working hard to make sure that the middle class was doing well financially, but not just the middle class, the working class, that blue-collar jobs paid well, and that that people with a blue collar job could afford to own a home and send their kids to college. This was the height of America, right? But we've been backsliding for 50 years. And why that is we'll have a long talk about that another day. But, neoliberalism is the buzzword. If you don't know what it means, neoliberalism, take it home with you. But let's go to the next slide. As of today, I believe we got these numbers from 2016, 2017, and but I can tell you the truth is these numbers haven't changed much. So, and that's kind of the problem. But we might classify the poor and the working poor as people whose income is below $24,000 a year. That the working class are people whose income is between 24 and 75. That the middle class is between 75 and 121. That the upper class or the professional managerial class is for people whose household income is between 121 and 431. That's a big spread, but it actually isn't a lot of people. And then there's the ruling class, that class of people whose total household income is over $431K a year. That's a lot of money. Do you imagine that these 5 categories each represents 1/5 of the American population? Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for knowing. Thank you for that. Of course it doesn't, right? But it's easy to be misled into thinking that way, especially when we see charts like this. Let's go to the next slide. If we add wealth into this consideration, we can expect that the poor and working poor have a negative net worth. That the working class people have a net worth somewhere between 0 and 170K generally. And again, this chart is about discrete categories, but the truth is these categories are constantly overlapping, right? The middle class, however you might understand it, would have wealth between 170K and $500,000. Upper class people or professional managerial class people might have net worth of $500,000 to maybe $10 million. And then we have those people in the ruling class, so the owning class, that have net worths over $10 million. The next slide. So this is what the actual breakdown is. That the poor and working poor represent the lowest 20% of the American population. That the working class, rather than being 20% or 1/5 of the American population, it's more like 40%, more like twice that big. That the middle class, depending on how you understand it, is about 1/5. And the upper class, the professional managerial class, is again about another 1/5. But that minus that 1% at the top of that group, which we would have to separate out as the ruling class. And when you look at how much total wealth belongs to these different groups, you can start to see better. We have the poor and working poor, they have negative net worth. They owe us money, us literally, right? The working class is that group that is the largest of these categories, and altogether they have about 3% of America's net worth. The middle class, which again, we'll talk a lot about education, how this plays a role, but you might understand the middle class is people who have working class salaries but have higher education, something like that. Well, they own about 8% of U.S. wealth, and then there's that group that's about 19% of American population that owns about half of all American wealth. And then there's that 1% that owns almost as much as them. As the 19% below them, 40%. And again, these numbers were from 2016, and I know, and it's been in the news, and a lot of you know, it's only gotten worse since then. Perhaps it should be 50% in the ruling class now. Or perhaps it's close to 50% just with the 3 people who sat on the stage for the inauguration. Okay, next slide. Denise is going to talk to us about significant life experiences and break down a couple of these categories we have coming up.
So we've talked about money, we've talked about education and income, wealth, and occupation. So now we want to talk about the life experiences that people often have in these different classes with those factors. So if we could have, we're going to skip the next slide and go to the next one after that. Yeah, this is good. So if you're looking down the left-hand side, you'll see these factors that we use to define class. And then across the top, of course, are our 5 categories of class. So what we want to do a little bit today and in our workshop coming up is fill in some of these boxes that are in lavender, but we don't have time to do them all. So I'm going to take 2 of the categories, and I'm going to tell you about some of the experiences from this study that we're using and how they relate to the people in 3 different classes. Okay, so we will go to the next slide now, and we're going to first talk about power and influence. What is the power and influence people have in these different classes? Okay, can I have my oligarch come back up, please? Now, this is so recent in our headlines that none of us are going to have any problem with this one. So what type of power and influence are you likely to have as an oligarch? I'm just going to tell you these, and then we'll go over them more in our workshop. Maybe your power and influence is at a national level. Can anybody imagine how that could be? Also, maybe at an international level. Maybe your name is Musk. Maybe some of the people in your ruling class have influence in both economic and political spheres. You know, well, look at the headlines. And the power and influence that you wield will most likely impact people in all classes. And we see that happening already. Through your social connections and your social status, you may be able to influence decisions that will increase your wealth and power and that of your family and heirs. Okay, that was easy. Now we need our middle class teacher. Let's look at her power and influence. As a middle class teacher, or anybody in the middle class, you may be positioned in a political or economic decision maker, but likely more at a local or regional level, not at a national or international one. Some of your influence may result in changes in the lives of others at the local level. Maybe you're in a teachers union and you help affect some change. And through your social status and social connections, you might be able to help your future generations remain firmly in middle class where they might be financially secure. Now we want our landscape worker. Who was the landscape worker? Okay, pretend we have our landscape worker up here. And think about the power you would have as an hourly landscape worker. You probably are not going to be able to influence international or national decision makers. You probably don't have a lot of power or influence at all over local things either, except you still have the right to vote, and there's power in that. The political and economic decisions that are made by others in the upper classes will in fact impact your daily life. And you may not have the networks or the social connections to help your kids even get out of poverty. So thank you. If you guys can stand up here, we'll go to the next slide. I know we're doing this quickly, but I wanted just to give you some ideas about experiences. So lastly, we're going to look at the income and wealth. We already know what, some people say you make. But we want to look at the experiences in each class. Most people in our oligarch class, our ruling class, derive their income from assets and investments. So working might be optional. Your vast wealth may be due in part to one or more inheritances, and you're likely to pass those on. You're likely to pass on your wealth onto your family members. So we know there's a whole lot more than just this, but I'm sharing this. And I forgot to put a cough drop in, sorry. Now we're going to our teacher. Regarding her income and wealth, Your day-to-day and living experiences are generally paid through salaries or wages rather than income from investments or assets. Your wealth will generally be in the value of your home or in the savings for education and retirement. You are likely to be financially able to plan your own retirement and retire when you want, and it will be your decision when you retire. Now for our landscape person. It is likely that your wages are not enough to pay for your basic expenses. You must rely on government and community groups just to get by. You are more likely than the people in any other group to have to use predatory lending services, like the payday cash advances, which puts you in a cycle of more financial problems. You are likely to experience chronic lack of health care, food, and other basic necessities. Retirement income will most likely come from Social Security or disability, but they will not cover your basic living expenses. You may have to continue to work until even after you start receiving benefits, until you can no longer work, and then have to rely on friends and family to help you get by. Thank you so much to the three of you. We just wanted to help you look at the experiences that people have, and we'll go into it more detail, so that as we come together as groups of people of different classes, we understand a little more about where they're coming from, and not that they're coming from where we're coming from. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we are about out of time, but I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. I hope you'll consider coming to our workshop. I have a lot more data, a lot more graphs to share with you, but it's not really about, it's not all about the numbers. It's not. It's about understanding what it's like to live in America, and to what it's like to live in America as a person different than who you are now. The greatest challenge to us in our time is solidarity. These categories and these life experiences, they create real barriers between people. And our job is to transcend those barriers, to transcend the divisions, form a power base that allows us to resist the oligarchs. Because if we don't, they've got all the tools, right? I would like to convince you that it's our fear of talking about class, our fear of talking about the fact that we are a very powerful group of people here. Many of us are privileged in every way, and many of us are disadvantaged in specific ways related to our identity as a person of color, as a woman, as a queer person, as someone who's neurodivergent. There's lots of ways in which we face struggles and challenges in life, and the ways in which we aren't given the keys to the kingdom. And yet, can you imagine a more powerful gathering on Sunday morning than the one we have here? And the reason that I say that is because I know how many of you have master's degrees and professional degrees. I don't know. I know a lot of you do. I didn't demand that you put the Post-it note on your forehead, but I know that we have tons of wealth and high earners here in our congregation, right? That we live in a self-segregated, self-separating community out here in the western suburbs, where it costs a fortune to come and live near us. So that fact alone makes me think that we are a really wealthy people. And I haven't even broken into your bank accounts to find out. So we are the ones with the power. We are the ones with the privilege to figure out how to move forward in America. We are the ones whose job it is to step across class lines and across class boundaries and create solidarity with working class people to vote differently. It is our job to create a politics of solidarity that will draw people to vote for candidates who will make America better than it is now. And we can't wait for those politicians who are funded by the oligarchs to step up and start spouting the rhetoric that we finally, yes, that's what we can't wait for that. They aren't going to do it. They are thoroughly vested. The oligarchs work hard to find the right people who will say the right things and who will do what is in their class interest. So I challenge you to take on this sense of responsibility. If you come to our workshop, I'm going to convince you that the fantastic programs of 2020 and 21 that were designed to meet the challenge of the pandemic, like the child tax credit, the expanded unemployment insurance, and greater access to greater spending on Medicare, Medicaid, and gave people access to health insurance. That I have charts that show how steeply the poverty rate declined. How we got the poverty rate among children in America down to like 6.5%. But it's already back up to 14%. It's already, because for some reason, we didn't recognize how popular those programs were and how totally doable they are on a permanent basis, right? We weren't the people who had the signs that were demanding that they take more of our money in taxes and they give it to the people who have children who live in poverty. Why weren't we? Well, because this is all so complicated. And we're constantly told that, those politicians, they're going to figure it out. But they aren't. We have to do it. And I would like to suggest that solidarity between us and those working class people who voted for that guy that we don't like is the linchpin of it all. We have to make sure that we don't allow ourselves to fall into an othering kind of thinking that says those people, those working class people, those working class white people who what they experienced during the pandemic was a dramatic reduction in poverty, a dramatic improvement in their material well-being, their greater buying power when they went to the grocery store, better financial security when they went to bed at night, knowing that, well, next week's bills I can pay them, next month's bills I can pay them. That kind of thing makes a huge difference. And it disappeared for lots and lots and lots of Americans during the last 2 years. So no wonder they voted for change. We are so quick to call them racist and sexist and homophobic and transphobic, and we want to believe that the people who are filling up the airwaves with those being the reasons are telling us the truth. But the people who are doing that, they're paid by the oligarchs. They're paid by the people who own the networks. They're paid by the people who own Twitter. They're elevated by people who own our social media, because it outrages us, and outrage is what sells. Outrage is what keeps us clicking. It is our job to resist that lie and find solidarity across these class lines to make America better than it is now.
Thank you for insisting people can actually hear each other. I appreciate that. If you don't feel like you fall into one of those upper class categories and that you aren't part of that group, my experience in life is that you probably already know a lot more of this than some other people in the room. And so in that case, I hope also please come to the workshop, because your life experiences are really important for other people to understand. And I think one of the elements of socialization is that upper class people are very isolated from the realities of the world. So your experiences are valid and incredibly important if you are willing to share them.
Okay, we are out of time. But I want to thank you again for coming, and I want to encourage you. Can we go to the next slide? or the one that has the thing about the workshops. Do we have one about? Yeah. So you can come join us again for about 4.5 more hours of this stuff over those 3 weeks. And we'll go beyond hopefully we'll go well beyond just talking about all the problems. And we can get into the point of how do we build solutions? How do we learn about what it's like to live in a different class so that we can be effective advocates for solidarity and change, understanding where we come from and where other people are coming from. Knowing about those differences is crucial to being able to build solidarity across class lines. Okay, that's it. Thank you for coming.